Welcome to the Cincy Postcast. I'm your host, Kevin Wallace. And look, folks, you already know what you're getting into with this episode. This week is Hell is Real. This match is upcoming with all sorts of baggage overhead, right? Matt Miazga news dropped on his suspension for this match, but 10 minutes before we hit the record button, and, well, you get the unfiltered view from the postcast on this one. At some point later on, we do our best to try to preview the match and even offer predictions despite nobody wanting them. This is one heck of a week, one heck of a match, biggest match in FC Cincinnati's history. One hand tied behind its back. You put all that together, and folks, you got yourselves a mighty fine postcast for you.
All right, we're not doing the intro this week, Kevin. I'm mad. I'm hot. I just want to get right into it. They know who we are. They know I'm the chief. They know that's Grayson. They know you're Kevin. This is bullshit. I'm sorry. If you listen to the podcast with young kids in the car, I'm sorry in advance. Caitlin, I am sorry what Henry is about to hear right now. Tell him his uncle can't be listened to this week. What a absolute crock of shit. We just got the word literally probably 10 minutes ago about Matt Miazga, and I am as mad about this as I have been about anything in sports in a while. There are so many things that piss me off about this, not the least of which that there has been no evidence presented still of Matt Miazga's wrongdoing. None. Pat Brennan's article indicates that there was video evidence. We haven't seen the video evidence. Why has the video evidence not been released? Why is the videotape not out there? You're suspending the Defensive Player of the Year for the Eastern Conference Finals and potentially MLS Cup. You are absolutely influencing the outcome of this match by not allowing him to play. You should release the goddamn evidence. You should release the fucking tape. Number two, I have it on very good authority from someone that I've been talking to that I'll rate as a source in this matter, who has been dead on about everything, including what the proposed suspension would be and what suspension actually ended up being levied in this, who says that this decision has been sitting on the commissioner's desk for weeks. This investigation, if there was video, could have been conducted in 24 hours. The appeals last 2 to 3 days in this league. There were weeks that MLS had to conduct this investigation and issue this suspension that would have given FC Cincinnati time to prepare for Matt Miazga being suspended. And by all accounts, they were caught blindside by this because Miazga was training for this match as recently as yesterday. And now less than 72 hours before the match kicks off, they finally get around to letting everybody know, oh, by the way, Matt Miazga is not only out for this game, but he's out for the next game and potentially 2 more games after that next year. What the fuck was taking them so long to do this? If there was video. I cannot remember. Yeah. They are saying with a 3-game suspension that Matt Miazga's conduct is as bad as Kai Wagner's racial abuse of another player on the field. Because he got 3 games for that too. Yeah. You're also telling me that Pat Noonan, who went on the record publicly with newspapers saying that this was a total fabrication. So now, is your coach of the year a liar? Are you publicly calling the MLS Coach of the Year a liar when he called this entire situation fabricated? What is it? Instead, we get a cowardly, craven, weaselly bullshit PR statement released at 7:30 on a Wednesday night. Again, less than 72 hours to kick off in this match, announcing a suspension with no accompanying evidence. I'm fucking hot about this, and I'm about to start drinking on a Wednesday night, which is never a great way to start the preparation for a match week.
Well said.
Sorry, I'm fucking mad.
Good.
Mad. I'm mad about this, and I told you to hit record because I was probably going to rant about this for 20 minutes before we started recording this podcast. I am incensed at how all of this has been handled, and maybe I shouldn't be in this league any longer because we still don't know what Bruce Arena did. And I'm left wondering now, is Matt Miazga being suspended because Bruce Arena attended an FC Cincinnati match? And we made a public display of allowing him in our field. And is this a stop that to our team? Is he being suspended because Pat Noonan got involved in the disciplinary process and started speaking out defending his player? We don't know because this entire process is opaque and they have not shown their evidence. They have not shown their cards on this. And you have to show your work if you are going to impact a game this big at the 11th hour like this.
Yeah. The timing of this, setting aside everything else, the timing of this is horrible. This is so incredibly unprofessional and unserious from this league. If this were the NFL and this was the AFC title game, and you're going to suspend, a star player,
JJ Watt.
arguably,
You're going to suspend TJ Watt. You're going to suspend the defensive player of the year. This would be like suspending Aaron Donald in the Super Bowl 3 days before kickoff. That's what this is right now.
Less than 3 days. Like, this is where MLS is living in this sort of weird in-between world where it is so it's so large now that it actually attracts, lots of eyeballs and lots of money, but it's so small that it doesn't have the sort of scrutiny from Vegas or from, say, more traditional sports outlets that won't apply this pressure. Bake into this what little sort of established sports media exists in and around MLS already seems to not like FC Cincinnati as a franchise and Matt Miazga as a player specifically. Don't see anything wrong with this. I haven't seen a single word calling out the timing of this, the way that this played out. Just like you won't see them, critique the league for how they handled Bruce Arena or any other matter that this league keeps intentionally opaque, left to your own imagination. Everything is sort of, you're going to have to guess at it. I mean, even in the various, we've seen from Pat, Laurel, The Athletic, a few other places that have sort of written the story of what happened. We have pretty large discrepancies. If I were a defense attorney, I'm looking at this going, they can't even tell me what food he was holding. How am I supposed to believe this eyewitness account? Like, this is ridiculous that they have video evidence that they won't let anybody see, that we have written testimony that is wrong or at least inconsistent at best. This doesn't make sense on the face of it. I don't know. Grayson, would you like a moment to speak?
Yeah. So I want to be a little bit more measured here. I don't have any, I'm not doubting anybody's sense of what the timeline was and how this was handled. And I agree for a few reasons, which I'll, I guess, hit on, that it's clear that this was handled like not in the right way. I still think that the PSRA coming out with a tweet, and getting the ball rolling on setting the narrative was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There clearly had been a match report sent to the league. And if there was an issue to be looked at, the league was perfectly fine and capable of looking at that.
Yeah.
Not enough time had passed between, what was it, the 4th and the 7th, in my view, for sorry, I'm terrible with dates, but I think the tweet came out the 7th and the game was on the 4th.
Yeah.
Not enough time had passed for the refs to have allowed the league process to play out. Right.
Right.
And to have actually concluded that an injustice was being carried out and that they weren't being appropriately protected. So this was this was clearly, in my view, I'm open to other explanations. None of them seem to be forthcoming. It seems to be read as a given that it is fine for the refs, at least as an organization? But then what about individual refs? Could an individual ref come out and say, you know, I gave this guy a red card. I think the league should add to his suspension.
Yeah. Why not?
You know, what is the line here? What's the guiding principle for when officials can go ahead and advocate open in the public when the other parties are stuck, you know, with the process behind closed doors at that point in time? You know, what makes it okay for the officials to tweet what they tweeted, you know? And this was before the hearing even, because we know from Laurel's article that the hearing was November 9th. Okay. And, you know, we can get into the weeds on that a little bit, but, you know, because I still have a lot of questions. But one thing I noticed is there's this other, it's been characterized as an eyewitness statement. I have a lot of questions about it. So I guess I'll explain. Have we like explained? We haven't set that one up yet, have we?
I mean, we should just back up and say Matt Miazga has been suspended for 3 matches by Major League Soccer Wednesday, November 29th at 7:05 p.m. per a PR press release from the league that only says it was that and an undisclosed fine for his misconduct. Nothing about entering a forbidden zone or anything involving referees. He will also undergo a behavioral assessment, and he is allowed to do some sort of program to potentially reduce his suspension or his punishment. It's not clear if that's the overall suspension or maybe just the fine part of that.
No, it is clear.
Oh, it is. Okay.
It says he may petition for reduction in suspension based on continued commitment and compliance with any recommended treatment programs.
There we go.
So what I suggest is we recommend a treatment program tonight.
Yeah.
He commits to complying with it, and then he petitions for reduction tomorrow. Yeah.
He's already, I mean, we can count one game as one game served. And let's say he does serve the crew game
served because it's for yellow card suspension.
Sure. But in terms of what I'm going to argue here, we're going to serve these at the same time. And then he's free for the final. So there we go.
Right. This is, like, for me, this is a tainted process because of the PSRA tweet.
Yeah.
And which makes this a tainted playoff. Because they openly advocate. I mean, you had the MLS Ref Stats account tweeting a bunch of candles around a wish for a Matt Miazga 6-game suspension.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm not going to dox that person, but my understanding is that person has been a professional soccer referee, not at the MLS level, but in lower levels, and does seem to be tuned in with professional referees. And so, you know, what are we supposed to take away from that?
Yeah.
That you have, you know, people who are trusted as neutral arbiters of the game openly advocating for a player to receive a particular kind of suspension in the middle of the playoffs, based on information that's not public at that point in time. You know, making information public. Like, there's a reason that when you're doing like a criminal proceeding, you know, there are rules regarding what the prosecution can say can say publicly about the trial, you know, so as not to taint the process.
I'd say our former president is learning all about this process right now, at least from that side of things. Yeah, there's a way to influence this for sure. There's also, like, not for nothing, the last match and now this match, Pro has decided to put the most senior, tenured, respected referees on FC Cincinnati's games, not the just recently announced referee of the year or somebody who would otherwise have been getting this. Like, there does seem to be a deliberate effort to try to avoid the idea of bias, because I think it would be pretty obvious that there would be bias if certain individuals were being assigned to these games, even in a VAR capacity or even an AR capacity. I just find it fascinating that all of these accounts, all of these referees have it out for Miazga, which, to be clear, predates this incident. Go track Joseph Mame's Twitter feed, where he laid out all of the yellow cards that Miazga gets for non-soccer activities. And you'll notice there's a theme with certain referees and Matt Miazga. But like, Maxine Chenot doesn't have various referee stan accounts demanding his suspension and expulsion from the league. But Yersa Mosquera goes flopping around a little bit, and all of a sudden you've got writers from The Athletic acting like they've never seen somebody flop before. It's hard to not see a constant pattern here. I don't know. Chief, what do you make of this?
Just sitting here stewing, like, silently.
I mean, we know refs are biased.
Sure.
We know they are,
Yes.
because people are biased, right?
Right.
And, for the sake of the game, we buy into the idea that between the whistles, we have this neutral judge.
Yeah.
To keep a handle on proceedings. And we know that, if we're looking outside of it, we know people have different tendencies. We know how people have their favorites. We know that, unconscious bias exists. Like, I can't make heads or tails of the apparent reputation of Kubo among MLS referees as being a dirty player to anything other than an unconscious bias.
Right.
And that's not my perception that they call him a dirty player. We have a coach from CST, I think, has said that he was told that refs think Kubo is a dirty player. And I think there's a lot of unconscious bias with how Obina Wobodo is refereed.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's just disbelief that he's making the tackles he's making, or a predisposition to think that Obi, for whatever reason, is a rough player. I think that all exists, which is why, not to harp on this so much, I just find it so unconscionable that the ref union put this tweet out, because it creates an appearance. It creates an appearance of bias.
Yeah.
And you can't do things as a referee that add to the appearance of bias. You simply can't, And it makes me...
It breaks the illusion. Chiefs talked about that with players. Like, you want players to at least pretend like they like being a player on your favorite team and playing in your city. Referees need to pretend to be neutral judges. And I'd argue the best in the business are the best at appearing to be unbiased. They may very well have their biases, and maybe they work very hard professionally to overcome those. And that's why you do tend to see the best referees reffing, World Cups and UEFA Champions Leagues, et cetera, because that gets recognized. And then there's the rest of the guys.
And so there's I saw a tweet, I think, a couple weeks ago that is like, after Sartini's comments about being the likely suspect if this ref is killed and Miazga's reported behavior, they were like, who would want to become a referee, right? And there clearly is a particular type, because I found a profile of an MLS referee that went through like kind of his background.
Yeah.
And,
why don't you run through this background for us?
I'm not going to...
Yeah, we don't need to name the referee.
I'm not going to say his name.
No, you don't need to.
Because this is not a witch hunt. Unlike the PSRA tweet, this is not a witch hunt. I don't want people like going after like specific referees. This is a macro discussion for me. Like for me, this is a macro philosophical discussion. And so you have let's say like a referee background is somebody who, like runs for mayor of their town when they're 21, right? That's like kind of psychotic.
Yeah, it's bold.
That's annoying. Like 21-year-olds running for public office, uniformly annoying no matter what side of the aisle. Okay. And I'm gonna put a hard line on that. I mean, people running for public office generally, but like at 21, you're supposed to have like a personality at least at that age, and then becomes a TSA screener.
Oof.
It becomes a state trooper.
Oof, these are deliberate choices.
These are deliberate. And then when they're an official, like make sure that they're one of the like official members of the PSRA union, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're just a cop. Like you're just a career cop, and cop like not in the way like you're a career police officer, right? Like specifically a career hall monitor, I guess is a better way of putting it. And
the commitment to public service sort of slips once you become a referee.
Well, because it's not just public service. It's like you want control from a very young age.
Right.
Right. I want to control people as a job forever.
Right.
And it is like a kind of thing. And, we know how I feel like anybody who like kind of the veil hasn't been lifted from your eyes of the way people who seek authority can abuse authority. I think you would have to be naive to not have reckoned with that at any point over the last your life. But
have you had a boss?
Yeah. So the process was tainted. And for various reasons that we're going to go into, this feels very, an individual was injured in a police violence related incident tenor to it. The stuff, everything is written how it's written on purpose.
Yes.
And we need to have more than we've had so far, transparency from MLS, the MLSPA, and I hate to say it, FC Cincinnati, and Major League and Matt Miazga. On what happened here. And it just feels like, but the issue that we're dealing with, and the reason certain information is out the way it's out, is that one side was happy to game the process in public view,
mm-hmm.
and the other side let the process play out behind closed doors, like it does every year, every week in MLS.
And I don't want to lose sight of the fact, too, that the side that is gaming the process started all of this by tossing up a BS yellow during PKs, knowing full well that that was going to result in a suspension for yellow card accumulation for said player. So they baited this player with a stupid decision into whatever happened next. Everything that happens from that point forward is on the match official for in that moment having no control over the match.
Yeah, it snowballed for sure. I mean, you can go back, you can go further back that it snowballs from Tom Barlow not getting a red card for a horror show tackle.
Yeah.
On Yerson Mosquera.
A leg breaker.
Yeah.
if that goal in the Red Bulls game is called a goal, none of this happens. If after that celebration, Miazga is just told, hey, get moving, good refereeing is used in that moment instead of hall monitor behavior of that's it, you need to go to the principal's office. If good refereeing is used, none of this happens. If PSRA doesn't take to the court of public opinion, none of this happens. This is when people talk about a ref show in a game, this is what a ref show looks like when it extends beyond the four corners and the 90 minutes of the game, is what this is.
Yeah.
And as a result, one of the best players in MLS will not be on the field for one of the most important games in MLS and arguably the most important game in his team's history.
Yeah. And
I'm just furious.
Yeah. On the ref show point and how they've been happy to use the media this way. Something that I have not seen connected is, we saw after the Philly game, the little non-answer that PSRA gave to the pool reporter question on the offside, onside goal late in the game. And this isn't about that. This is about how the PSRA collective bargaining agreement has specific restrictions on media questions, and there's also rules about like what reporters can ask them, and they get like one pool reporter question from the group collectively, and they get, I think, no follow-up questions.
Correct. No follow-up questions. And it's not answered directly. They get a written response, I believe.
So they get a written response that can be as BS as they want. And so they're fully protected from having to talk to the media, after a game to explain any of their calls or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to, gaming the playoffs, they are more than happy to provide all types of information to the media and to the public. Yeah. And one thing I had to pull up the language. So there's a few things in the game day procedure in the pro CBA relating to media questions. One of the restrictions is an official shall not answer media questions from the pool reporters until such time as she has been given appropriate training by pro, which may constitute distribution of its media policy.
The party would like to see your answer first.
Here's another one. Media questions prior to the match or during halftime shall not be answered by an official.
Oh, just straight up.
Yeah.
Forbidden from answering.
So yeah, it's just interesting, right? Mm-hmm. And if they want to come out and give press conferences and answer questions about stuff, sure. But as it stands, there is no way for anybody to ask any questions of them, except for, who they pick and choose to get questions from,
right?
And what questions they wish to answer.
And charitably, let's say, you don't want to pick at the referees too much because you might expose some of this bias, right? Like you might pick at it and accidentally discover some bias, which is why, I don't know, you'd want them to shut up while an investigation is ongoing.
But the players, on the other hand, they get press going into their locker room.
Yes. and fined if they answer.
They get press. They get press. Watching them like get ready to shower. Like, how many times have we seen like NFL? Has there been a interview with somebody in the locker room and you see like a fully naked football player just walking behind in the background? Like this.
Right.
This is the level of
they did
scrutiny.
Kyle Long dirty in an interview that way.
This is the level of scrutiny that players are under in the United States. And, the players, they're just like a lot of like, I don't mean this in a bad way, but like, they're just like big dumb apes, like they're not people who have to memorize like super long rule books and get training as lawyers and police officers and whatever else they, do in their, what else they've done for their day job. I mean, referees by and large, I would wager, are much better educated than most of the players. And so should be perfectly fine handling a question from somebody as intimidating as Pat Brennan.
Like, I just don't understand what the harm would be. Like, hey, could you explain why that handball was given? Oh, well, per the rules of the game, the ball bounced off the torso first, therefore it had to be a handball. Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification. Like, what are they worried is going to happen? That Pat Brennan is going to shit in his hand and throw it at him?
I guarantee what they're worried about is that any amount of scrutiny of officiating after the match will reveal just how little officials actually see and how much of it is made up on the spot, is makeup calls, is best guess type stuff. And these people just aren't equipped to deal with that. And the sports don't want that known. I think it is by and large. I think that if you scratch beneath the surface on this, you will realize very quickly how little control and how little about what's going on most of these officials notice and what they see. Because if you did this in the NFL, you would have the ability of you would have the ability to talk about an insane number of missed calls. Soccer's the same way. Missed call here, missed call there. And the answer would be a lot of, I don't know, I didn't see it. I don't know, I didn't see it. And that would reflect poorly, I think, on the way that the sport is officiated. And they don't want that. You want to talk about maintaining illusions? By walling officials off like this and not allowing them to be held accountable or answerable to the media, it preserves the mystique that the officials know more than they really do. And I think that that's a lie and that's bullshit.
But when they selectively break that, right? You can't use that as a sword and a shield, You can't just selectively choose, oh, we're going to break it here to perpetuate an agenda.
Right.
But the rest of the
cute little show on YouTube where we go inside the call, where we selectively curate single experiences for people to see. It's like tours of the North Korean regime. We're going to take you through one decision where we have selected it and curated it so that you can see this one specific thing. Pay no attention to all the other calls we're not going to talk about. Here's the one piece of news we're going to give you, or the one question to the pool reporter. Like, if there was any integrity with the media, they would say, we refuse to publish anything that the officials say until they're willing to answer questions from us. We're not going to play your part of your game. We're not going to be, limited in your response. If you want us to tell your side of the story, if you want us to publish this, you're going to need to answer questions like a big boy. But they know that won't happen because it's news and there's not a single reporter out there that won't print the news they get.
So, not to defend the refs, because this is going to be painted as a hit job no matter how fair or how what lengths we go to or I go to explain like why criticism is coming a certain way. I do like the Inside Video Review program. And they do, and they have at least times like our game against New England, they commentate in the video that the officials should have overturned the non PK call, that should have been reversed and called a penalty. So, but a shortcoming of that is that the situation like the end of the game against New York Red Bulls, when we know there is audio of the center official talking, and there's probably a video assistant review official audio as well, talking about whether they're going to recommend review of that as a goal or not. Since that didn't go to video review, and we still like don't know what was called, because there was inconsistent statements.
Yes.
That may be reconcilable, but there were inconsistent statements coming from the center ref and then the question to the pool reporter later in the game, later in the day. But if we had that audio, which we don't because it didn't go to video review, if we had that audio, it would be very clear what the center ref called and why review was not recommended on that play.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a very, very fine thing indeed to have.
But it's to your point earlier. It's that the show is fine. I find it interesting, but it is a curated experience of one call. It would be like if instead of having to answer questions from the media after a game, Joe Burrow was allowed to pick one play, break that down with no questions asked, and then come to a conclusion as to whether or not he thought he did a good job on that play, or whether or not he thought the offense did a good job. It is substituting their sanitized approach and selectivity of what we are given information on from an actual answering of questions and accountability to the media, to the paying public that watches these games and pays for these games, and everyone. And it's infuriating because it allows them to selectively pick and choose when they want to involve themselves. And they do so in manners that never expose themselves to gross amounts of incompetence and gross accusations of malfeasance. There will never be an MLS You Make the Call show where the audio is the referee saying, I missed that one. I didn't see anything. Did you see what happened? No, I didn't see what happened. Well, hell, Houston hasn't had a throw in a while. Give the throw in to Houston. Like, you will never get that audio because they curate the experience. You will never get the audio of the person doing VAR who is arguing furiously with a match official as the match official stubbornly claims, well, fuck you. I know what's right in this matter. You don't. I hate it. And yeah. I hate that this is all because one official lost control of a game at the end, and then everything springs forward from there. And yeah. I hate this. And I hate that we ended up here. And I hate that we are now 72 hours out from less than that, from what should be an incredibly exciting game. And the entire thing is tainted now by the fact that FC Cincinnati will be without unquestionably its best defensive player.
Yeah. It'd have been one thing if all of this had come to light, that week, right? Like we'd still be upset, right? But if the investigation happened and evidence was presented, it's thrown out there, and the league says, hey, per our rule book, this is a 4-game suspension. It's not that bad. However, we want to set a precedent. We're going to go to 3-game. He can walk it back. And all that happens before the Philadelphia match. This is different. This is a very different conversation. This is a very different approach. And I think to the folks that are mad at Miazga, I think you're right for a large part of this. However, I mean,
we don't even know. We
right?
don't know still,
which
is because according to the MLS Coach of the Year, the accusations upon which the suspension were based were a fabrication. Not that they were exaggerated, not that it was a misunderstanding. It was a fabrication.
Yeah. We've seen that with the testimonies and or with the statements from eyewitnesses, but we've also seen from Tommy Scoops. Tom Bogert went on Twitter and basically said that players interact with referees after matches like this all the time. And it almost always goes without any, write-up or anything like that it's incredibly common. Now,
I don't want to overstate what he said.
Okay.
My recollection of what he said was that he doesn't know what's going to happen with this situation because he's never seen a situation. Was that at the time? What's
at
that?
the time when he said it? It was at the time. Yeah,
it was at the time. Yeah, that he doesn't know what's going to happen because he's never seen a situation like this made public, or it was something along those lines,
right?
Which definitely implied that there are post-game interactions between refs and players that go unreported and uninvestigated and unpunished.
I'll say, and untweeted about by the referees union, which is, I'd say, probably why you've never heard of those incidents. Which is what drives me insane with this. Yeah.
And there's no reason this couldn't have been announced yesterday or Monday or before the last match or the week that this appeal happened and was allegedly denied. There's no reason.
We said
There's
this last
absolutely
week.
No reason.
The timing of this matters. The timing of this impacts how Noonan and the staff coached for the Philly game, how they lined up for the Philly game. If the word to Powell was, hey, we got Arias coming back, you need to bust your ass. I need you to burn your tank empty this match because we've got Miazga coming back. We've got Arias coming back. You will be on the bench against, Columbus or Orlando. And now that's not the case. That impacts how that team was lined up. It impacts how this team has been training all week. Hell, it lost a day of training because of this. If this had been at 7 a.m, they might have radically altered the training. Different guys would have been getting the run out. Different guys would have been conditioning, assuming anybody's still healthy on this team to be at practice. Yeah, the timing of this absolutely matters and absolutely impacts how this team is lined up. And it could have been over before the Philly match, and here we are.
There was an entire international break that this could have been done over. And so where I'm at right now on this is I want to see the evidence because someone is lying. If it's either the PSRA report, it's their alleged eyewitness, or it's Pat Noonan. And the people that talk to The Athletic and the people that talk to Pat Brennan. Someone is not telling the truth. Pat Noonan has put out there that this idea of Matt Miazga bursting into the locker room after the match was over, like some sort of a wild thing, is completely false. He specifically denied that, which makes it very interesting to me that now they're saying Matt Miazga needs to go to anger management. Like pushing forward the narrative that this was something where he stormed into the locker room minutes after the match ended, unable to control his emotions. Because that's what I hear when somebody's recommended anger management. I hear that this was an issue, that there was anger or substance abuse problems involved in this case. That's a hell of an accusation. That's a hell of an accusation against Miazga that somebody is lying about. Either Pat Noonan is lying about, the eyewitnesses that spoke to the media are lying about, or the officials are lying about. And I want now to know the timeline of this and what took so long to reach this decision and why this decision was made at the 11th hour before the Eastern Conference Championship. Why this couldn't have been done days or weeks ago to give FC Cincinnati time to prepare for this decision. Because as it stands right now, unless they were taking depositions of people in a language spoken by two people on the planet, and they needed to find an interpreter or something, there is absolutely no reason why this took so long.
Yeah. That's it, man. Like this sucks.
And it does. And I guess, should we get into the details
of the incident?
Yeah.
Sure.
Of what has been reported. Because once again, so there's a written statement that, that the PSRA says, I guess it's like a summary of what their officials supposedly testified to at the November 9th hearing.
Yeah.
It says there was Matt Miazga went in, there was a loud bang on the door, which doesn't mean the door was forced open. Right? Because, so maybe the door was open.
Mm-hmm.
And they do have the detail that he's holding pizza and a brown folded paper to-go food container. Like very specific recollection of what he was holding, which I find interesting. The officials ask him to leave. Miazga says he wants to talk to the referee. So they say he was blocking the hallway to the exit, but they don't say he stopped anybody from leaving, which in fact a ref does leave unimpeded and go to the hallway. Okay. They also say that they were afraid he would escalate the situation, maybe even become violent. But they never say he did escalate the situation or become violent. Right? In fact, according to the ref's own testimony, it looks like the only person who put their hands on somebody or tried to put their hands on somebody was an official putting his hands on Miazga, at which point Miazga steps back, which is a de-escalating move, and says, "Don't touch me," right? Which tells me, which I think any reasonable person would find very clear, that he has no intentions of putting his hands on anybody, if when somebody approaches him, instead of standing his ground, which Miazga is the type who would be happy to stand his ground. Right. In a game or otherwise. This
is where I wish it was Yerson Mosquera instead, because as soon as the referee put his hands on Yerson, he would have collapsed to the ground, grabbing his face. Yeah. And this entire situation might have been avoided.
And the unattentive security guard might have blamed the referee there, yeah.
So it seems clear to me, based on the official's own statements, that Miazga's intentions are he wants to talk, that he does not want to fight, that he is not going to be violent.
Yeah.
And so what's your, what other interpretation of that is there? Like they throw in, maybe become violent, but they're not scared. But they're not scared enough of him to put their hands on him.
It's weasel word bullshit. They don't say that he was violent. They said that they feared he might become violent.
They feared him so much that they went to put their hands on him.
Right. They feared him so much when he let somebody walk out of the room that he was holding food, asking to have a conversation. Who escalated this situation?
Right. I'll tell you what, when I want to fight somebody, I go get my pizza first. And make sure I have one hand holding a pizza box and the other hand holding the pizza. That's how I show my
your disdain for the entire process right here.
Especially if you're trying to fight someone. Let's say that's your mindset, right? I'm going to go in there and pick this fight. And the second they lay hands on you, that's the open door, baby. That's your invitation. Hey, I went looking for a fight. This guy grabbed me. Game on. We are now fighting. I am dropping this pizza or I'm throwing it at them and we're going. That's the thing is if he did go in there with the intent of being violent, he was given at least two opportunities. I'll say brushing past him to get out the door is another one as well. Yeah. Of he would have had the opportunity to start something and never did.
And then there's a bunch of paragraphs that are just different ways of saying that after it was over, they went out and talked to the security guards and asked how that happened. It's basically 5 paragraphs or 6 paragraphs that are after the incident that are intended just to make it seem like it was longer than it was. I guess this is them processing their trauma.
Right, of course.
Right. This would be
the emotional damage.
This would be a whole season of Ted Lasso. But it's half of the ref's testimony is them processing their trauma.
And Chief had it right though. The feared for their lives. That's all I was hearing when I was reading that statement or whatever that account. Man. Yeah.
I feared for my life.
He was reaching into his waistband and hey, we can't take chances here.
An unknown object inside his pizza container. That could have had a weapon. He could have had a weapon. It was folded. The container was folded. It could have been concealing a weapon.
There could have been pineapple on that pizza.
Little plastic
maybe
ottoman.
The ref is allergic to pineapple.
Damn. That's assault with a deadly weapon.
There's another statement. I don't really want to get into it because I don't think it's worth getting into.
The Red Bull.
Yeah. So
blogger,
there's a guy from Bad Dog Sports, which is like a New York sports blog. I'd
Great
never heard
name.
of it. I went on his Twitter account, and all he does is he tweets about New York sports and in support of Donald Trump. That's like all the account is for.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, good. Like, I agree. Like, I think that's a good thing.
Wow.
That's why I mentioned it. That's why I mentioned it. I mentioned it because it was good and I liked it.
Grayson is full of surprises.
Yeah. I'm
Make the postcast
Bad
great
Dog
again.
Sports and
need to.
Matt Miazga. This is just another thing that us and all the FC Cincinnati podcasts have in common.
Right.
We all support old Donnie. And we just don't tweet about it as much as Bad Dog Sports.
We should.
So there's it's like a typoed, ungrammatical, unformatted statement that was apparently a DM to PSRA.
Cool.
But
Totally not suspicious.
First off, that tells you they read them, folks.
Yeah.
So
the first thing I would note, I want to note about this is, it was sent after the hearing, so it could not have been considered. So I assume at least.
Depends on who's laying down the punishment and when they're allowed to lay it down.
I guess, but it was not. It was not part of the November 9th hearing testimony.
Right.
Well, a lot of shit's apparently gone on since the hearing and announcing this fucking suspension.
Some new information has come to light.
You're going to have a hard time convincing me that whatever the fuck was going on at the MLS disciplinary process or in the commissioner's office ended the second the gavel banged at the end of that hearing.
Yeah, that's true. And they could, for
I'm
all
also
I knew,
assuming they use a gavel too, just for added emphasis.
for all I know, they were considering how annoying we were on Twitter. What they didn't consider was referees creating burner accounts just to mess with FC Cincinnati.
That was great.
And leave us bad podcast reviews.
Yeah, that was fun.
Well, they're going to love the silent protest that is currently ongoing as we're recording. So
yeah. So so the statement, aside from being ungrammatical and tough to read, has a lot of problems with it.
Mm-hmm.
He said they were standing right next to the locker room door, which I don't know, I guess that was the FC locker room, and they saw him enter the referee locker room, which would answer a question that we had initially, which is how close does the FC locker room in Red Bull Arena to the refs locker room? It sounds like they were right next to each other.
Right.
If this is true. And they say he started shouting immediately, but I don't know that they also don't say he opened the door, by the way. They just say he entered.
Curious.
They say he started shouting, but they're not seeing what's going in the locker room.
Okay, but we also need to add some context to this, by the way, too. I'm going to shout out to FCC//lunatic on Twitter, as this is breaking right now, that this individual has, I don't want to say doxed, because doxed is a dirty word, but done some research into the proprietor of Bad Dog Sports. And would it shock you to learn that on his official bio on LinkedIn, between January 2014 and December 2018, he was a soccer referee for the U.S. Soccer Federation.
Incredible.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
So good. That is so good.
So
shout out to my man's FCC//lunatic. You are making the postcast a better show in real time. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So
he's probably a union member.
Might have sent the tweet. We have no reason to think they didn't.
Until they come clean with who's tweeting this.
Hey, who's a member of the union who is good at Twitter? Oh, how about the guy running a Twitter account professionally?
So I don't know that. I want to be clear. I don't know that that's true. I have not verified that.
Fair.
He's probably still mad at Miazga because Miazga was supposed to be his ride to DC a couple Januaries ago, and he flaked out on him.
We get them from both sides, folks.
But anyway, for some reason, this guy did not find any of this relevant to tweet about in his time or report about,
Yeah, like you have
publicly.
this, you run Big Dog or Big Dick Sports or whatever it is in New York, and you've got this juicy
Bad
story.
Dog Sports.
Bad Dog Sports. Well, it's Bad Reporting Sports because he had this incredible story about a out of control Matt Miazga allegedly, and not one word of it appeared on his website or on his Twitter feed, is my understanding.
Interesting.
Yeah, I scrolled through to November 3rd and didn't see anything in his tweets acknowledging
You don't think
it.
that would be interesting that a former United States men's national team player who just won a big match in in New Jersey. Maybe that's why he didn't point this shit out. It was because it happened in Harrison, New Jersey, not New York. But you don't think that's at least worthy of a tweet if it actually happened the way you say it did? One tweet of, man, you'll never believe the shit I just saw Matt Miazga do, former United States men's national team and former New York Red Bull player.
So what Bad Dog Sports says,
yeah,
it doesn't sound like a lot of time passes in this recounting. But he says somebody from FCC came out of the locker room looking for Matt, and then another reporter who was with him told him that he needed to get Matt out of the locker room. And he does say that at no point did security go in there. The ref testimony said that a security card did go in to the locker room. This guy says at no point did a security card go in. So, and they also say that he says, hopefully this information helps you and the officials out, which is a fun thing to add.
Mm-hmm.
And he also says he was holding a tray of food. Matt Miazga was holding a tray of food with half-eaten burger, loads of ketchup with some fries, if that detail matters. which is funny,
right?
To me, because he seems to think that corroborating the type of food he was holding could make their stories match, right? But we know from the ref's testimony that they say he's holding a slice of pizza, and a folded brown cardboard tray. Not tray, like a brown cardboard to-go container. Like we've seen them. They're they're pizza slice shaped.
Right.
Right. Not a tray with a burger and fries and loads of ketchup.
It's also important to note that pizza is from Comet Pizza and Ping Pong in Washington, D.C.
Hey, we haven't heard any contradictory evidence to that story.
He got it in the basement. Don't worry.
So,
oh my God.
And he says, I mentioned it to a bigger outlet who said they would back me if I put a piece out on it.
Sure. Source, trust me, bro.
But it's not it's not sure who the bigger outlet is, but it's not The Athletic. Because he says the only other media present was facing the wall of the FCC locker room and had I don't understand. Is this like the Blair Witch Project? Is like a guy from WLWT standing in the corner of the FC Cincinnati locker room, just waiting because he's been bad. He's in timeout.
It was a conspiracy. We're all going to look the other way when Matt does this so that he has plausible deniability. But only Bad Dog Sports was there to see the story.
But it says Red Bull security never entered the room to remove Matt.
Oh,
that's so there's a large number of inconsistencies between Bad Dog Sports and what was presented by the officials apparently at the hearing.
Yeah.
And it would be great if instead of a summary of testimony, we had, details of everybody who presented, what everybody said, and specifically what was determined happened, why those determinations were made, and what supported a 3-game ban. But instead of what we get from MLS is a PR statement that doesn't even say the ban is for entering the ref's room.
Right. As far as we know, it's for yelling. It's for shouting.
It's for misconduct.
Yeah.
It's for hurting the refs' feelings and making them feel like something was about to happen.
It's for giving cause for the PSRA to embarrass MLS.
Right. Maybe the disciplinary committee is just very, very strict interpreting Catholics who acknowledge that you commit sin when you think about sin, not the actual act of sinning. That they could feel the violence in Matt's heart as he stepped towards the referee's locker room. And in that moment, he had already assaulted the refs because he had thought it.
Damn. They might need to atone for that.
We also should say confession and reconciliation. Live the fourth, Matt.
There is no So I want to focus in on the punishment for a second. Why 3 games and a fine, right? As far as anybody can find publicly, there is no stated guideline or list of punishments for entering the referee's locker room, which does feel like maybe there should be, or at least something along those lines. There doesn't seem to be a standard. It did appear that most of the, let's say, pro referee Twitter accounts that we could see seem to be harping on 6 games. And I remember 6 games was like the first thing that popped up when this incident first came to light. And
well, it is important to know, as Grayson, I think, said in the group chat earlier this week, that anything over 5 games would be appealed to an independent arbiter. Anything under 5 games is appealed to the commissioner, which is what it was here, is my understanding.
Yeah, that's how and you know, I apologize if I misinterpreted some of that language, and I do think that there's like disciplinary guidelines that, as far as I can tell, aren't public. But by pulling up and anybody can look at this, so like I encourage people to take a look themselves. It's on the MLSPA website, is the MLS collective bargaining agreement. But the way I read it is that if the punishment is less than 5 games and a fine of less than $5,000, there's a commissioner appeal. If it's more than either of those, it goes to an independent arbitrator.
So,
which there's like a whole honkin' procedure.
Yeah,
that's like a whole section of the agreement.
Because you got to assume at that point it's something egregious, if not heinous, right? Like that's pretty big. Like you're gambling on games for your team to lose and playing in those games or something. So with that in mind, though, this punishment, as far as we can tell, is just being handed out by Don Garber. And I have to imagine people are surprised, or at least were, I don't know, not shocked, but like the first time they would have known how much he was being suspended was with the PR announcement. It wasn't a standard set thing. Like if you got a red card, you know you're missing the next game. It's not a surprise when you're suspended the next game. When you enter the referee's locker room, is it a surprise if you're banned for 3 games? Is it a surprise if you're banned for 6 games? Is it a surprise if you're banned for 1 game and a fine of $1?
Yeah. Is it a surprise if you're fined $25,000?
Right.
Like there's no guidelines. There's no sentencing guidelines for this. And before anyone gets any crazy ideas, please do know that because all of this is subject to a collective bargaining agreement, no, FC Cincinnati cannot go out and get some sort of an injunction against MLS in order to allow Matt Miazga to play in this game. The process by which this is handled through a bargained for process between the MLS and the MLSPA. Miazga, by being a member of the MLSPA and a signatory to the collective bargaining agreement, by extension, does not have the right to take any crazy legal action outside unless there was a violation of the actual process spelled out in the collective bargaining agreement.
And if there
as much as I would love to go and file a federal lawsuit to get Matt Miazga back on the field this weekend,
if there was a violation, and honestly, well, 2 things. One, if there was a violation, you know, maybe there would be some type of way to. I don't know anything about this stuff, but maybe there would be some type of way to at least get like an injunction in the meantime. But on the
you don't know anything about this.
but on the other hand, again, I don't know anything about this stuff, but I know that like when Cedric Benson was suspended, I think for substance abuse, he filed a charge with the National Labor Relations Board saying it was an unfair labor practice. So if the MLSPA or Matt Miazga were to file a charge with the National Labor Relations Board, maybe there'd be some public filings that people could get their hands on.
So a favorable judge that can move within 72 hours.
This is where we need...
I don't know anything about this, but you wouldn't get your injunction from the National Labor Relations Board. That would just be one way to make some of this stuff public.
I got you.
This is where I nerd out in Cincinnati sports law history. God rest his soul. I wish he was still alive right now. But when Major League Baseball attempted to ban Pete Rose and successfully banned Pete Rose from baseball, there was a local judge here in Cincinnati. There's some great articles you can read on it, named Norbert Nadel, who was just a legend in the Cincinnati legal community, who actually did a hearing and heard an injunctive relief petition from Pete Rose, and Major League Baseball had to send all of their New York lawyers to Hamilton County, Ohio, to the courtroom of Judge Norbert Nadel to have a procedure in place as Pete Rose attempted to get injunctive relief from his suspension for gambling and his ban for gambling from Major League Baseball. And I'm just wishing he was around now to save us, because there was one thing I loved about Judge Nadel, is that a very famous quote of his, the law is an ass.
Perfect.
And mostly an impediment to doing what's right.
So I'm going through the Bad Dog Sports Twitter likes.
That's where we're at on the podcast.
And there are a series of likes about like the importance of like HOA bylaws and their enforcement.
Oh no.
Which, another trait, let's say.
That's not even a good not ideologically consistent is what I'm going to say. It is if you're just a big fan of rules, though. Like, if that's your jam, hell yeah. HOAs.
You know what it is consistent with? It's consistent with, how our boy acts. I'm not going to name him again. We all know who I'm talking about. And then, certain types of authority figures. And the PSRA acted in this case, which is rules for thee, not for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It should be noted, Nadel actually prevented Pete Rose's suspension from taking effect. He was overturned instantaneously. But all we would need is just 24 hours. You file this on Friday. If you roll a good judge with equity, you just need this to go through Monday. So, you just need the injunction to last long enough. Make sure the first district is closed.
I don't know anything about this, but how likely to find somebody working in the state courthouse on, like, say, Friday afternoon?
Like, how far into the afternoon? Like,
that just answered the question.
It's like, would you consider 9:30 in the morning the afternoon?
It's afternoon somewhere, baby.
It's filing hours somewhere. Yeah, they don't like it when you file things on Friday afternoon. That's an easy way to not ingratiate yourself to bailiffs and court staff. I'm told.
Hey, hypothetically speaking,
look, we've all been there when a deadline. It has really, really slipped your mind. This sucks. This is...
Yeah.
I'm still mad. I'm calming down a little, but that's mostly because I'm out of alcohol as we record this. And God, this sucks.
Do we try to do our best to reset and look at this game knowing generally who we have available player-wise?
Yes, but I want to, before we leave this topic, I want to say two things.
Please.
Okay. One is...
Fuck, bro.
Yeah. One is, someone's going to listen to this and think, well, they're not holding Matt Miazga accountable for his behavior at all. And to that, I would say that's correct.
Because we don't know what he did. We still do not know what he did.
But, we've said that this is a process-based podcast. Many, many times we've said this is a process-based podcast.
Absolutely.
And the process here, totally fucked.
Yep.
And it's
Bad
just
process.
like when you read like the Miranda rights, you go back and like read about these guys that these important civil rights come from. Were they guilty of the stuff they were picked up for? Yes. Right? But that's
you got to follow the process.
But you got to follow the process.
Yeah.
And the process protects the guilty and the innocent. Right? And so sometimes you got to let a few guilty people go just to make sure the rest of us have our rights protected. And
look,
that's all I'm saying here, right?
Yeah.
And if you want, if you're one of those, carceral people and you don't care about process, then, I'm sorry for you.
Yeah. What happens next year in the playoffs when the PSRA well and truly fabricates a story, well and truly pins a innocent person with some story, some narrative, gets their buddy who used to work with them, who is now posing as independent media, to write up an independent report saying that, yes, indeed, Obina Nwobodo punched this referee. Oh my God, we've got 3 referees in the room and we've got a reporter outside that said all of this happened. I mean, yeah, this is a little ridiculous.
I would also postulate and put out there, in addition to what Grayson said, you can think what you want about Matt Miazga. And I tend to think that there is a large portion of the MLS intelligentsia that already has a fully formed opinion in the negative about Matt Miazga. I think there are a lot of reasons for that. Frankly, I think that there's a large portion of the FC Cincinnati fan base that in the abstract would probably dislike Matt Miazga as well if he wasn't one of our players. Again, I think there are reasons for that, and I think that goes along a little bit with big dog sports political leanings as well. It doesn't have to be about what Matt Miazga did here or what he didn't do. I would suggest that we still don't have a clear understanding of what he did or didn't do. And if you take at face value what he did, I would also suggest that the punishment for that action is grossly disproportionate to other punishments that have been levied for what I would consider to be far more egregious conduct. And I keep going back to the idea that Kai Wagner was suspended the same number of games for allegedly substantiated allegations of racially abusing another player in this league. And if you are telling me that the account written by the MLS, the pro MS, whatever it is, PSRA official of Matt Miazga standing in a door, letting people pass, making no aggressive actions, and his only statement that you could even remotely consider to be aggressive being, "Don't touch me," when he is touched by someone inside that room. If you think that is equally as deserving of an equal suspension to racially abusing a player, I suggest that you've completely lost the thread on either the severity of what Kai Wagner did, or you are overreacting to the severity of what Matt Miazga is alleged to have done. That's point number one. And point number two is, independent of whatever Matt Miazga did, the timeline for how all this went down sucks. And there is absolutely no transparency or explanation as to why it took this long or led to this moment. The only conclusion I can come to about that is that they were just hoping FC Cincinnati lost on Sunday while Matt Miazga was serving his yellow card suspension to absolve them from needing to make this decision. And that is cowardice on behalf of MLS, the commissioner, and the disciplinary committee. It is cowardice that they would not stand up and stand by their decision, whatever it was, after the disciplinary hearing. And the fact that it took so long between the evidence being presented at the disciplinary committee and the decision being made opens up the possibility that other influences worked on the commissioner, whatever those are. Whatever those are. You mentioned, joking, Kevin, us being annoying on Twitter. or statements Pat Noonan made, or us having Bruce Arena at the last game, also the subject of the disciplinary committee and a ban from MLS activity without the approval of the commissioner. Any one of those things now becomes a potential decision point outside of the appeal process because it sat for so long after the hearing was done that we have absolutely no idea what went to that decision beyond the evidence that was presented against Matt Miazga. The process sucks, the timeline sucks, and the punishment sucks.
And there's no so I noticed another thing in so Laurel's story, which folks, should read, because definitely read this for yourself.
Yes.
And so you'll have to subscribe.
She's made it free. She's taken the paywall off this story.
Oh, she has?
Nice.
Yes. Yeah, bravo on that one.
Yeah, because I think this is important. I think people should read this, and probably smart to take the paywall off because it shows
what you're getting.
What you're getting.
If you pay and subscribe. Yeah.
I think in my quick scan, I thought this was maybe Laurel's preface, but now it's clear that it was written by whoever from PSRA sent her the long statements. When it describes the statement from Bad Dog Sports, who I did check, his LinkedIn does list him as a former USSF referee. And again, I don't want people going after these folks. That's not gonna do any good. Okay. It says it aligns with the testimony that our officials provided. I don't see how you could write that statement. I don't see how you could read these two statements and think anything aligns other than the fact that, yes, Matt Miazga entered the ref's locker room to some degree.
Right.
And I think you would only write that if you don't think people are going to read them and compare them. Because it's how you frame stuff, right? You frame stuff, and then most people just buy the framing. Yeah. Because they're like, oh, that's a lot of words, and it's in italics. It kind of hurts my eyes a little bit. So I don't think the statements align.
No.
They only align on the one piece of information from them that was publicly reported by PSRA by November 10th, which was that he entered the locker room.
Right.
Right. So you could easily fabricate that if you wanted to make your statement align with the PSRAs. I'm not saying it is, but I do think it's interesting that the only piece of the two statements that aligns is what the PSRA put out publicly. And it differs on stuff that, maybe Pat Brennan reported, that it wasn't a member of security that brought Miazga out of the locker room. I just find that interesting.
Yeah.
On what they align and where they don't align, based on what was in the public view at the time.
Yeah.
But then the last thing I want to say, at least for now, is Laurel did update her story with some commentary from the president of the PSRA.
Ooh.
Oh, man. Good.
We are getting this.
And we're going to get another fucking
live.
hour on this. Okay?
Jesus Christ.
He says, the president.
Who is he? Do we have a name?
His name's Peter Manikowski. He's a I believe retired referee.
That's right.
Who's working as an employment lawyer in I want to say Chicago.
Yeah. His name has come up before on this podcast.
I mentioned him mentioned him probably on the story where this first
another corrupt Chicago politician
when this first came out. But again,
look at what they've done to that great city with the Chicago. We can't have that here. No, we can't.
But this is a great example, right? Where you have somebody who's a professional advocate, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Who makes choices like spending half of his narrative summarizing everything that happened after Miazga left, all these talks they had with security about what to make it, adding details like they thought that maybe someday he might get violent, right? I mean, this is stuff. This is color. This is narrative. This is advocacy. I would suggest it's clumsy because we notice it, but nevertheless, it's more than you'd expect from Matt Miazga, who didn't go to college, right? He came up in the Red Bulls Academy and went straight to becoming a pro soccer player. And he's just been doing that. But he has to take questions from the media. Peter Manikowski doesn't.
No.
So he said that they're in the process of reviewing Noonan's comments and already have been in discussion with the commissioner's office about the accusations of fabrications.
Oh my God.
They have tasted blood.
Okay, I'm sorry. This isn't a Chicago politician. This is a Chicago mob boss. That's mob boss tactics.
There it is.
We hear what Pat Noonan is saying too, and maybe we'll have to talk about what Pat Noonan said as well with our people at the league, because we can't have him saying these things about our union, about our officials.
Jesus.
How dare you speak out against us? You might want to, sleep with one eye open there, Pat.
Oh my God. You imagine if Pat Noonan was like, well, we'll just make sure the cameras aren't working at TQL Stadium.
Yeah.
What the fuck, man? You can't threaten people. What the fuck? Oh my God. Well, I mean, look, we saw this last year, right? We saw this last year. Noonan made a comment about a referee who said something along the lines of, if you guys played better, you would have gotten those calls.
The referee told him you blew it. And that referee, stopped being a referee after that year.
Right.
Yeah, they circled the wagons around his ass, and his ass is unemployed right now.
So it took us months until Noonan publicly apologized. We lost every 50-50 call. Phantom handballs were being called. VAR never went our way. Goals were constantly being called back. Hell, Brenner might have lost the Golden Boot race because of those comments. Insanity.
We're going to go looking after Noonan right now. Yeah.
Jesus.
This is mobbed up bullshit now at this point. Now we've moved beyond the process being dirty to now everything about this is it stinks.
And I will tell you this.
Yeah.
Whatever happened behind closed doors, we can't say. And there is some extent of backing our guys on this, but if we don't back our guys, who is going to?
Nobody at this point. Where's the MLSPA on this?
We know Pat Noonan's comments in full, and based on the best portrayal of the PSRA's version of events, right? This is them putting their absolute best foot forward of what happened. Pat Noonan's comment, there is no way you could find fault with that. What he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but what he said was along the lines of, no, I actually have it in front of me.
Perfect.
Actually,
no, I don't have it in front of me. I thought it was in,
It's the extent of saying the idea, this notion that Miazga stormed into the locker room right after the final whistle in cleats and uniform and acted aggressively is a total fabrication. Everything he said is correct. Yeah. Even by their own admission, it's correct. He didn't come in cleats. It was well after the match had ended. He was carrying a pizza, which I think was also part of Noonan's statement about all this. Everything Noonan said is correct. And absolutely nothing in that statement that the PSRA gave, it's all weasel bullshit that we've already gone over in a matter that made them think he might be threatening or that made them fear what he might do next. This scary individual standing there.
Ugh. Feared for their lives.
He was coming right for me.
I was, but he didn't. That's the thing. He just stood there. Oh, God. The only thing I was going to bring up is that I was right, that we only were given the allegedly offside goal because this bullshit, this tomfuckery was coming. And now the referees can pat themselves on the back and looking like they were even-handed because they knew this was coming. So that's cool. That's cool.
Neat.
Glad we won. Man, it is funny to think that they really did try to hope we lost before dropping this, right? Because
it's the only explanation.
Weeks.
It's the only explanation that makes sense.
Nothing changed from Philly to today. From Saturday to Wednesday. No new evidence, allegedly. No, nothing has come up. Cool. Cool.
Just been sitting somewhere.
How many other suspensions are just sitting on an envelope in Don Garber's desk? All right.
Can one of them be Cucho Hernandez, for the love of God?
Speaking of substance abuse, that man drank piss. Okay, let's get over to part 2.
It's actually harassment with a bodily substance is the crime.
Let's try to talk about this game. My God. This episode is also brought to you by Cincy Shirts. Look, you know Cincy Shirts. You love Cincy Shirts. They've been with FCC from the beginning, and we here at the Postcast, we're just huge fans of their work. They were very early sponsors of the Postcast here, and we have always enjoyed their work. If you head on over to cincyshirts.com, that's Cincy with a Y, shirts.com, and check out using the promo code ThePostCincy, all one word, all caps, you will get 10% off your order, and you let them know that we sent you. Like, they have MLS and MLSPA licensed FCC gear available online and at their 2 retail locations in Hyde Park and Fort Mitchell. If they don't have your size on the shelf, they can print you one on the spot. That is a fantastic feature and something that I have used as well. So again, special thank you to Cincy Shirts. Head on over to their website or check the link down below in the description for the promo code ThePostCincy for 10% off your next order. And a huge thank you to Cincy Shirts. We're back. There's still what remains of FC Cincinnati to talk about versus Columbus Crew. I say what remains because it does appear that half of the team is out with what I will describe as flu-like symptoms. And if you're Pat Noonan, you're getting awful Philly 2021 flashbacks right now, where I think 18 players were out with COVID and they lost the Eastern Conference Finals to NYCFC that year. Not that that is relevant or matters here, but it does appear that a good number of players are sick and not training. Throw in there, we have Obi and Arias still coming back from injury, and now Matt Miazga's suspension. We have everything we've heard is that Arias should be 100% ready to go. He was dressed and on the bench, unlike Obi, who it does feel like is at best a coin flip. And I really worry.
Laurel did report that today that he has suffered no setbacks.
Okay.
Now that could also mean that he wasn't ready to go
right
last go around, and he's still not ready to go, but he hasn't gotten any worse. I mean, there's a lot of daylight in that rendition of things, but at the very least he's not getting worse.
Right.
So don't read into his inside status as anything other than that, I guess.
Yeah, he was training individually. Tuesday, Wednesday, he's indoors, which, as we laid out in our power pyramid of progress on the injury timeline, that does appear to be a regression. But yeah, as you said, Laura reporting that was in fact not a regression, or at least a setback there. And we do have to note that the Pat Noonan pyramid of health is our understanding of the pyramid of health is only during what I will consider to be normal United States soccer temperatures and weather. True.
And it was cold as balls earlier this week. So
it hurt. It hurt to be outside.
It's the first winter blast of the year hits different. I can understand why some of our players, given their backgrounds and where they call home, might do better indoors on a few of these days for training.
Yeah, I think it was 20 degrees at certain points outside over on the east side of Cincinnati. So with all of that, we've got to face a Columbus Crew team that, granted, not the best defense in the world, but one of the best offenses in the league. Cucho Hernandez is probably the best striker in this league. Diego Rossi at one point was a top 3 attacking midfielder in this league, and he doesn't appear to have fallen off a cliff talent-wise since joining Columbus. This is the kind of team that can bring Julian Gressel off the bench, that Nagbe is still capable of dropping bombs from midfield on any team. Played a frenetic best of 3 series against Atlanta with multiple goal games, a lot of 4-3 scorelines in that one. A more cagey affair against Orlando, but ended up winning 2-0 in the end. There was an Orlando red card, one of their center backs, Jansen, in the 77th minute. Or Columbus did not score until extra time, but still got 2. We put all that together, and I ask you, Grayson, how you feeling?
I think we really need Obi. Crew play a very possession-heavy style.
Mm-hmm.
They are maybe the best, maybe the best team in possession in the league, but probably are the best team in possession in the league. Darlington Nagbe is a huge part of that. So we need somebody capable of, taking the ball off of him and preventing him from getting the ball. And that's Obi. As good as Kubo played against Red Bulls, it's Obi. He's the best defensive midfielder in MLS.
Mm-hmm.
And Nagbe is probably the best on the ball central midfielder in MLS. So, I think that's important. And to another standpoint, though, FC Cincinnati, to the extent they carried over that press and counter style, as good as they are in transition, that may play into our hands. Because the Crew are going to want the ball. We don't need the ball, so much. We like to have it, but we also can play really well when the opponent has the ball.
Yeah.
And so there will be opportunities to take advantage of the Crew's back line.
Yeah. My problem with this game is twofold. Number one, I think so Columbus's defense is not nearly as good as Philadelphia Union's was. I think that's pretty fair to say. But the problem is that once again, without Matt Miazga, this team will be in a position where they are going to have to cover for at least one player on the field that is a glaring defensive liability on the back line. And as Kevin, you are very famous for saying, and I love this line because it's so true, soccer is a weak link sport. And so in the last game, you saw a very muted FC Cincinnati attack, especially down the wings, as the team attempted to cover and avoid exposing itself to Philly's counterattack. I think in this game as well, FC Cincinnati is going to have to expend significant effort at the expense of offense to cover for Miazga's absence in the back line, because however they choose to deploy themselves, if it's Powell or if it's Gaddis, that individual is a defensive liability compared to what would be expected, what you would expect to find on a team that is playing at this stage in the MLS Cup playoffs. Neither one of those players has any business starting a match in a conference final. It just doesn't happen with regularity. You don't make it to this point in the season if one of those players is on your back line. Yeah. So I don't know that we'll be in a position to capitalize on the issues that Columbus has on defense with how much effort we're going to have to expend covering on defense to stop their attack. The other thing that's worth noting, I think, is that FC Cincinnati teams have not performed well historically against Wilfred Nancy coach teams in the opposition. When he was with Montreal, outside of one game we played against them in Fort Lauderdale in basically an empty stadium affair, his teams have absolutely lit the scoreboard up on FC Cincinnati. All of those wild games we played against Montreal, where the memes about FC Cincinnati and Montreal games just go bananas, those were largely the result of those Wilfred Nancy Montreal Impact Montreal games back in 2021 and 2022, where they were routinely hanging 4 and 5 goals on us in those games. This year, we played Columbus tough at home, but that was early in the season. It was right at the start of his tenure as manager of the Crew. They didn't have the full lineup that they have now with a lot of the players that they have now. Now, to be fair, Zelerian is no longer there, but they've added Rossi since then. And Cucho is a player that has been getting better over the course of the year. And the full strength Columbus team that we saw in August absolutely just dog walked this FC Cincinnati team that was also missing Matt Miazga in that game, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
So I am very, very worried that specifically with the coaching matchup that Wilfred Nancy has this team figured out.
Yeah. So the August matchup is a good one to go back to, I think, in particular, because this was the lineup that day. This is what we ran out. I'm gonna work from the top on back. So Vasquez and Bupenza both started up top with Lucho Acosta behind them. Also in midfield were two guys, Moreno and Wobodo. On the left side was Barrial. On the right side was Alvis Pau. We had an injured Santi Arias. The back line that night was Ray Gaddis, Ian Murphy, Nick Hagland, Celentano in goal. So we were without Miazga, yes. We were also without Mosquera. I believe he was locked away in Toronto at this point of the season. Remember that? That was
simpler
funny.
Times.
So if we take that lineup and we move Powell to the back line, put Arias into the starting lineup, and you swap out Gaddis for Mosquera, I see something. Now, I'm also reminded that the earlier matchup with the Crew, where we did win, yes, it took quite literally the save of the year to maintain the win versus taking a draw in that game, which is likely how it would have ended if Celentano had not somehow flapped his arm into the right spot. So, yeah.
And that we were all at that Columbus match. Go
We
watch.
sure were.
Go watch Away Days if you
Yeah.
haven't. And based on the view count, most of you haven't.
Yeah. Go on YouTube.
Check it out.
I'll post a link to it in the podcast for some reason.
That was not a competitive game of soccer.
It
like
was
that.
rough.
At no point did FC Cincinnati look like they had a chance against that Columbus lineup. Now, I will point out there are two caveats. That number one, to the negative, was that Rossi, I believe that was his first match for Crew after acquiring him. And they didn't bring him in, I think, until like the second half, late in the second half.
He subbed in the 58th minute.
Okay, 58th minute. So that's not good that they beat the shit out of us before Rossi was even integrated into the roster. The big sort of asterisk on this game, and I understand that part of this is little copium right here, is that game was on a Sunday, and Wednesday was the big U.S. Open Cup match against He Who Must Not Be Named.
Yeah.
And you will have a very, very hard time convincing me that half of the mental energy of every player and every member of the coaching staff wasn't already being expended on thinking about what was going to happen at TQL Stadium on that Wednesday night, only a few days after the Columbus match. That's not an excuse. It's going to come off as sounding like an excuse. I think it's just a reality that I think everyone in this room would agree that other than this game, the biggest game we played all year was that Inter Miami match. And I think everyone would be forgiven for at least having it in the back of their mind that that was also what was happening later on in that very same week as the second leg of Hell is Real.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much you can read into any of these results that have happened this year for this. But
yeah,
I'm nervous.
And not for nothing, too. That Columbus game happened after the Leagues Cup knockout to Nashville, which left us with like 16 days between matches. So it was a weird setup. It did feel like a lot of the energy, as you said, was going towards that Open Cup matchup against Miami. And it showed, frankly. I've said it before that to me is one of the greatest matchups of two MLS teams ever, that Miami and Cincinnati game versus the Columbus game, which was not terribly competitive.
Don't forget that there was an improperly given penalty to Alvaro Barreal in that game against Columbus.
That's
They
right.
called him for a handball, and certain people in our fan base, for whatever reason, fell all over themselves to say it was the correct call. Only for, Weeby and other official commentators, including Ref Stan of the Year, saying that it was not a correctly given handball, which once again, you never have to give it to them, people.
Yeah.
No.
You don't have to hand it to them. You are going to end up in a situation where you defend a call that was demonstrably wrong against your own team.
Yeah.
Like it's
And
just don't put
point,
yourself in that position.
Yeah. At that
I just took away from that statement that refs are ISIS. So
Yeah.
both love rules, let me tell you.
both are like kind of insular organizations.
big fans of regulating behavior.
Not a lot
ISIS
of contact with the outside, except for when they really, really want to.
I was
except for
about
when they want to lob
argue
bombs.
for ISIS for some reason. I will stop.
How does the PSRA feel about driving Toyota pickups?
Come on down to ISIS Toyota. Oh man, great sketch. Man, yeah.
So for this
Jesus.
game, like looking at it objectively in terms of what FC Cincinnati is going to need to do to win this game, they're going to need to score goals. They are not going to win this game 1-0. I just don't. I know playoff games tend to be played closer to the vest, and the closer you get to MLS Cup, the more conservative games tend to be. I do not think this team can hold Columbus out of the net for 90 minutes. I just don't think that's I don't think that's a reality, missing Matt Miazga. And even if Wobodo does play, it's a roll of the dice at this point as to what level of what are you getting, a 10 out of 10 Wobodo, or are we getting a 7 out of 10 Wobodo? That makes a huge difference in terms of how things play out in this game. I think that in this game, it is imperative that Santiago Arias is healthy and plays the majority of this game. And the other thing that just needs to happen in this game is there needs to be moments of brilliance from the offense. And that specifically is Lucho Acosta and Aaron Bopenza. Is it telling that I'm not including Vasquez on this because I think that he's too far in his own head to have a big goal in this game? Maybe, but someone on the offense is going to have to make magic, because I don't think that they're going to hold the ball enough for sustained pressure. I think that they're going to have to pick and choose their spots on when to go forward so they don't get exposed by Columbus. And they are not going to be able to afford to miss opportunities in this game. They have to score, I would think, probably 2 to 3 goals to win this game.
Yeah. I think Grayson is absolutely right in terms of the ideal game script here is that Columbus attempts to hold possession and build slowly. That is the dream here. It does hinge on Obi. We'll see if Kubo can, I don't know, rekindle some of that magic from the Philly match, but it's going to come down to beating them on the break and being clinical in the 3 or 4 opportunities that Lucho and Bopenza and Vasquez and Barreal will have in this game. Because if it is a track meet, I don't think our defense can hold up. If it is a slow, plodding game that relies on them to build up meticulously and us breaking quickly whenever we can force a turnover, I think FC Cincinnati can win this, especially with Arias and Barreal adding to that firepower. I think if nothing else, I think we have enough options to win a firefight, but I think it would work better if this is a slower paced game.
So they can win the game, but it's an incredibly tough week to have Miazga's suspension drop, some type of flu virus going around the team, and Obi's status, and to some extent Arias' status, which Arias seems probably further along, but still pretty up in the air
because they can't play another game with Ray Gaddis going up and being a black hole offensively on the left-hand side of the field or the right-hand side of the field. They just can't do it. So they need more.
Yeah, and guys have missed training all week. That's going to hurt. It sucks, and this is one reason why the Supporters Shield is much more indicative of who's the best team than the MLS Cup playoffs. Yeah. Because if guys get sick a week, you don't lose the Supporters Shield most likely.
Right. You weren't the best team in the league because the flu hit your team on a Tuesday before a game.
Now, if they're all making out with one another and they all get mono, mono going through the locker room might be a problem for the Supporters Shield.
I will
shout out to my man Sam Darnold, still a legend.
I will say, if nothing else, let me try to do a little positive spin here. One, I think this takes a lot of pressure off of FCC. It doesn't make it a pressure-free game by any means. But if this is a pressure cooker, just press the little steam release valve a couple of times with this. That you've been handed back a couple of bucks of house money. And I will say, if we do win this one, no matter how, I'll take an offside goal, folks. I'm not going to complain about one. It's going to make a victory so goddamn sweet. Because let me tell you, this is by far the most important game, the biggest game in FC Cincinnati's short history. I think the Miami Open Cup semifinal and the New York Red Bull semifinal in the USL days are the only two that can even compare. And they don't, given the weight that the MLS Cup has in the United States and North America. And this is Columbus. And if nothing else, it's a rivalry match. Just throw out the records, put all the bullshit aside. All of these guys are going to want it. Level this out a little bit. Man.
It's also it's fortunate this is a playoff match. If these two teams were playing right now in a regular season match, I would say that FC Cincinnati has no chance. Right. Because you play a regular season match differently than you play a postseason match. And these games don't tend to turn into track meets. It's teams that play very heavily not to lose and play conservatively. And that is an advantage for a team that doesn't have an explosive offense the way Columbus does. Because when an explosive offense plays conservatively, it plays into your hands as a defense. So if Columbus plays this match like a regular season match, which I don't expect them to do just because it just never happens that way in the playoffs, that would be bad for us. If they play this and coach this like a postseason match with a knowledge of we have extra time, we have PKs, we have all these options for when we can score, that helps FCC. And you can look at the way Columbus played against Orlando, where they may have won 2-0, but those two goals were both in stoppage time. They did not break Orlando down, despite all their high-powered offense and despite all their incredible offensive prowess. They didn't manage to break Orlando down on the road over 90 minutes. That's hope for FC Cincinnati. If that's the style they're going to play here at TQL Stadium, then there's a chance. So you have to feel good that at least that's the case going into this.
Yeah. I mean, Orlando was even down a man 15, 20 minutes in regulation, and then the rest of extra time before Columbus was able to break through. So do we want to do predictions? Is there anything else to talk about?
Lucho won MVP. Cool.
Oh, yeah. Hey, that was neat.
Yeah, it was fun.
Lucho and who else was it? Miazga were best 11.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Good that did him. Cool.
Yep.
No Barrial. The best 11 is a weird.
Hani Mukhtar won best 11 despite not having like 2 goals in his last 19 games. Neat.
And Walker Zimmerman missed like 10 matches and also made best 11. So
cool. And Tim Parker made best 11, even though the entire Roman Berkey MVP case was that his defense was terrible. And he's the only reason they were even like decent.
Yeah. Congratulations. You put a best 11 out there that would give up 7 goals if they were playing a competitive match.
If you're a striker that scores a lot.
If you're a striker that has a reputation for scoring a lot.
No, all the strikers, all 3 strikers scored a lot.
It's the
if you're an attacking mid.
If you're an attacking mid with a reputation, or you're an American center back, that's your best 11.
Neat.
Did you have was Walker even a finalist for Defender of the Year?
No. It was I think it was Jansen or someone from Orlando and someone from Seattle. I think were the other 2 finalists.
No, well, it was Tim Parker was a finalist.
Oh, then it was Yamar.
Yamar was a finalist, yeah. So I can't make heads or tails of it.
I don't know how he's left off and Walker makes it. Look, nobody asked for this, but if you want to fix the MLS best 11, what you need to do is offer essentially the voting per actual position, not vague spot on the field. You do goalkeeper, wing back, a ball playing center back, a ball winning center back, a fullback, a defensive midfielder, box to box midfielder, attacking midfielder, a winger, a striker, and you get 1 wild card. You just get 1 more. Whoever you think on that list of 10, you want to add 1 more to it, throw it on there. That's how you can make the best 11, quote unquote, look like a real team. And you'd actually be rewarding a wingback versus a fullback, a box to box midfielder versus your attacking midfielders. Folks, it's very easy. Just actually give out the awards for the
watch the
positions.
sport.
Right. Anyway, prediction time. This sucks. I really don't want to predict this.
Can I just I gotta say it. I
thought you were gonna try to end the podcast.
I thought about it. The joy of winning this game doesn't nearly match up to the overwhelming and horrid fear I have of losing this game. Like it's
the point is not to feel joy. The point is to avoid sadness. That's all this is.
And here's this sort of sickening feeling that I've been dwelling on since the Miazga news dropped.
Okay.
And that's that in our best season ever. Did you say this last week, Kevin? I think somebody said this last week, that in our best season ever, that they're going to beat us and they'll be able to say for all time that even in your best year, you were still second best.
Number 1 in the country, number 2 in your state.
Yeah, as a
I feel it coming. I feel it coming. Not
predicting would be cowardice in this moment, wouldn't it? It would make us no better than the MLS. It would make us no better than the statement that was released tonight.
Look, a prediction is transparency here. It's a window into our minds and our mindsets. Look, you don't get any credit for predicting a loss and we lose, but I think it's fair to say the prediction right now is being used as a gut check of how you feel right now, confidence-wise. So I go to you, Chief.
Why do I have to go first?
I mean, I'll go first. I say we lose in penalties.
We advanced we went on penalties 2-2.
I was also thinking 2-2, so that's good.
Grayson is like using the force right here. Like you can see his face. He's like, this is Luke trying to raise the X-wing. Is the face he's making right now.
5-3 victory.
Yeah. Let's go. 4-2 victory in extra time.
Oh, hell.
2 goals in extra time. Oh, my God.
Oh.
At least 2 in extra time.
At least 2. I like that. Oh, Jesus. If there's it's 1-1 or 0-0 going into extra time and it ends 4-2, man, be another argument for best game of all time.
Another prediction. Will we be heinously screwed by an officiating call in this game?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I was willing to say no until we got that addendum from the PSRA president. They're out for blood. And if it's not the center ref, it's the VAR. And if it's not the VAR, it's the fourth official. Yeah.
I'll say this. And for me, we've said our piece, and they certainly don't care what we think.
Yeah.
The PSRA. They certainly don't care what we think. And we've said our piece. Nevertheless, everybody out there, I do think that it is fair to say that all of Alan Chapman's credibility is on the line going into this game.
Yes.
Yeah.
If he is like the most respected referee in MLS, and arguably he is, he's putting it all on the line this game. And I think that is an important thing to note. And if he calls a completely fair game, good for him.
Yeah, fair play.
I would say that's somebody who is worthy of his reputation.
Fuck Columbus.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Cincy Postcast, which is a production of The Post Cincy. You can check us out at thepostcincy.com for all of our written content, as well as links to our social media. You can follow us on Twitter, and as well, you can join us on our Discord server. You can find links to that server both in this episode description as well as on our website. That is where most of our conversations are going on. We have a lovely community there talking about FC Cincinnati, MLS, anything and everything else and everything in between. We also want to give a huge thanks to Jim Trace and the Makers for providing all of the music you've heard throughout this episode. They're an amazing local Cincinnati band. Again, more information about them is in the description of this episode. And if you enjoyed what you listened to, and you've made it to the end, so I'm going to assume you liked it, or you just can't reach your stop button, please like us, review us, subscribe to us wherever you are getting your podcasts. That is going to be really, really helpful. But more importantly, share this with a friend. A personal recommendation helps spread a podcast so much further. So please share this if you know somebody in your life who's an FC Cincinnati fan, an MLS fan, somebody that you think would enjoy this. Pass it on over. Thank you so much again for listening. It blows me away that people continue to listen to us. And thank you so much again.